Hey guys, Brendoni Productions here, and welcome to this Python tutorial. According to these notes that I wrote, today we're going to be talking about if statements. So, we've already done quite a deep dive into the basics of Python. We've talked about types, we've kind of talked about assigning variables, and most importantly, we've talked about booleans and how various types convert into booleans. So today we're actually going to get into the first part of our control flow in our programs. So what is control flow? Well, all the programs we have written so far are basically just read and executed line by line. Anything you type is then executed. Control flow is the idea of executing certain code paths for certain conditions. So if statements are a way to execute this, then that. Otherwise, this other thing, functionality. So let's just dive straight into the syntax. So the syntax of if statements is something like if this colon. So we're just going to say if 1 is equal to 1 colon, and then the body of the if statement is actually indented after the colon. So we're going to go over 4 spaces, which is the Python standard, and then we're going to say print 1 is indeed 1. And then we're going to have an else block. So an else block is so inside the if statement body, we do things that occur when the tested statement is true. Inside the else block, we do things that occur when the tested statement is false. So, just like the if statement, we're going to space over 4 and print 1 is not equal to 1. And then to end the if statement inside of the Python REPL, we just press enter again. And we immediately print out 1 is indeed 1. And this is because 1 is equal to 1. So, this is if statements. Now, this thing that is executed inside of this if statement right here, this test statement, if you will, all it is a Boolean. So, as we learned in the last video, pretty much all types can be converted into Booleans. So, instead of actually making some sort of test, right? So most people would consider a test being like if 1 is less than 2, or if variable 1 is not equal to variable 2, then do something. For our case, since we're in Python, we can also insert a Boolean here. So we can say if true, print true. So in this case, it's pretty obvious what will happen, right? The test statement is true by definition. So of course the if body is going to execute, as it does. What else do we know is true? Well, we learned in the last tutorial that a list is actually considered true if it has content. So if 1, 2, print true, else print false. And it prints true. So everything that we learned in our last video about converting types to Booleans applies to if statements, which actually does a kind of cool semantic, right? So if we tell a user insert a string, and we say string equals input, what is your name? And then Python will say ask what is your name, right? And I'm going to type nothing. I'm just going to press enter. And then we can use the if statement here. So if not string, which is the Python's way of inverting Booleans, right? So we're saying, so from our last video, first of all, we know that strings are true when they have contents and false when they are empty. So we could say if string, and this would check to see if there's contents in the string, but we want to see if the user did not enter contents, so we can print a little warning message to them. So in Python, you invert Booleans using the keyword not. So we're going to say if not string, then print you did not enter a name. And immediately that does print out because when the input came across, I just hit enter. So we did not actually get any value out of that. So this is the basic uses of if and Booleans. Now, much like other programming languages, there's also the else if, except in Python, it is elif. So if we have a kind of complex thing, let's just say num equals 2. So we can say if num is 1, print number is 1. Elif num is 2, print number is 2. Else, so in this case, the else means that the number is neither 1 nor 2. Print number is neither 1 nor 2. And we get the response number is 2 because our else if condition is true in this particular example. So there can be multiple elifs as well in an if statement. You can have if, elif, 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 else. And actually, this is how you check to see if let's say a number is equal to a certain number where you want to maybe delegate to functions. You use the if elif pattern. You could also use a dictionary, but that's more of an advanced pattern. So this is the if statement. Now, the interesting thing about Python if statements is the if statement itself is actually used as a ternary expression. Much like other programming languages, there is a ternary expression in Python, but it is in line and it takes the same syntax as the regular if statement. So let's go ahead and try that out. What do I mean by ternary expression? Well, a ternary expression is something that has 3 parts, the name ternary. So in a single line, we have an if test, we have a then result, and an else result. So we can actually say something like variable, we're going to call it var, equals 1. If okay, so let's just go ahead and say, let's create a new variable called name, and I'm going to put it as my name, right? And then we're going to say number equals 1 if name is Brandon, right? Because Brandon is number 1, else 0. So this is basically saying you kind of have to take this and read it backwards, right? So if the name is equal to Brandon, then number is equal to 1. Else, number is equal to 0. So this actual thing after the equal sign is an evaluated expression, right? 1 if name is Brandon, else 0. So this will be evaluated and it will result in 1 because name is equal to Brandon, right? If the name was something else, we would get 0. And indeed, if we hit enter and then query for what number it is 1. So this is actually kind of useful for checking for values inside of a list. So like before, right, we can say result equals string if string, else default value. So our string that we previously entered, where I asked what is your name, right, the result could be is this. Then we get into this evaluated expression here, right? So string if string. So string is true if there are contents. So if there are contents, we're going to use the result of string. Otherwise, we're going to use this default value here. And if we query a result, we have default value because string was empty, if you remember. So that is a very nice construct. Now, one other thing with if statements, this is actually a pretty dense video, but so there we've covered if, else, elif, we've covered a ternary expression, we've covered not, right? So if we have true here and false, not false is true because it simply inverts the Boolean expression. We also have the keywords and or to test for multiple things. So we can say things like, if number is 1 and name is Brandon, print fact. Otherwise, print fiction, because anything other than saying that I am number 1 is fiction. And we get fact printed out because, indeed, our number was set to 1 previously and the name was set to Brandon. So we've checked those two things. That is the and statement, right? We can also use an or statement. So if number is 2 or name is Brandon, print hello. And we get hello printed out because although the number is not equal to 2, the name is equal to Brandon here. So once again, the way these if statements work is the if is read, and then this thing right here is actually an evaluated expression. So number equals 2 evaluates to false, right? And then name equals Brandon evaluates to true. And then this or performs a logical or operation on true and false. And the logical or result of true and false is true. True or false. Well, that is true. Same thing happens with and. We have number equals 1, which is true. Name equals Brandon, which is true. True and true is true. So knowing that, there's also a different style of construct for the ternary, especially with default values here. So we can actually say result equals str or default value. This is an extremely Pythonic thing to do, and if you read high-quality Python source code, you'll find this particular pattern in many places. This pattern is basically saying result equals, and then we have an or expression, so we have to evaluate it, right? So we have string here, str, and str is empty, so it results in false, right? So the way that or works is if you have a false value, it immediately takes the value it immediately takes the other value, right? So if you have a false or false, the first false will tell or to instead take the second false. And so or results in false because the second item is false. So in this case, if string is false, then the or will evaluate default value, and default value is default value. So result will become default value. However, if str is true, which means it has contents, then or will short circuit and it will not even check the second value. So this result actually becomes str. So if we try this and query result, we get default value. However, if we set string to hello and then use the same result equals str or default value and query result again, you can see that now result is hello because str evaluated to true and the or expression short-circuited and took the value of true as the result of the or expression. Right? It's actually the same way in all of these expressions. Like when we have this if number equals 1 and name equals Boolean, the and here is taking the value of both statements and evaluating them to Booleans, right? The or here is taking this first statement. If number equals 2, this is false. It's a Boolean expression. It is false, right? So then it takes the second value. This is also a Boolean expression. This is true. So we can do something like if number equals 2 or str, print hi. So number equals 2 here is false. So or checks the second test of its body, right, which is str. And str now has content. So str is true, right? So this expression However, this expression actually evaluates to hello, right? But then it is recast into a Boolean, and if sees the Boolean as true, because hello is cast to a true Boolean, and it prints hi, right? So this statement is actually the same as if hello, print hi. So the Python if, elif, else universe is pretty basic on the surface. However, it gets complex pretty quickly, especially since all objects in Python can evaluate to a Boolean. So sometimes there's confusing bugs in the code, right? For instance, we know that an integer, let's say n is 2, right? An integer can be 2. So an integer can also be none. So let's say m equals none. And you want to do a test. You want to see, let's say you do something like this. M equals none, you ask the user for input, and then you want to check whether or not m was set. So you would do something like if m, right? And this would evaluate to true if m has a value and false if m was none, right? That makes sense. However, if you assign m to be 0, this if statement will also be false. So there's kind of like a small catch-22 there. So a lot of times in Python code, you'll see explicit things like if m is none. And then we want to say print you didn't set a value. Silly you. So things are pretty complex. They can get pretty complex pretty fast, but on the surface, you have a basic if, elif, else pattern with colons to symbolize that the if statement is over and indentation to show the inside of the body. Thanks for watching this tutorial on Booleans, or not Booleans, if statements. Hopefully this shed some light, and hopefully you're able to read some Python code now. If you have any questions, feel free to leave comments, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Thanks for watching.